Buenos dias, my disheveled devotees. Sugar Pants back at it with more trash from the stash for the grand finale of Season 2. 1985's Creature, the Titan Find. It's kind of like Alien, only instead of eggs, the crew finds a sleeping alien in a pod, and instead of chest bursters, we get parasitic hive mind zombies, which sounds pretty fucking cool if you ask me. And since you're watching, I assume you did. So what kind of feature am I showcasing for the Season 2 finale? Let's check out that sleaze docket and get to the nitty gritty. We have 6 dead bodies, 22 cups blood, 2 cups slime, 2 naked breasts, 1 naked butt, gratuitous ear parasites, 1 faceectomy, 1 exploding head, 1 decapitation, and 18 plagiarized Star Wars blaster sound effects. Our feature begins with text explaining how space mining is the future of business. Bezos and Richter Dynamics and NTI are the 2 competing corporations, and apparently this is a future written by pessimists who couldn't imagine a world in which West Germany no longer existed. We join NTI on a geological research expedition on Titan, Saturn's largest moon. See? Movie says so. Our 2 astronauts are scoping out some structures that are dated to be over 200,000 years old. And what better time to investigate than during a lightning storm? Hang on a second, I better look that up. Actually, depending on the season, yeah. The 2 find some skeletal remains and take some pictures. Soon after, they find a storage pod that appears to be intact and remove it from the wall for closer inspection. Oh look, it's one of the lost containers of trioxin 245. One shines a light inside and is startled when the contents appear to move. Dropping the flashlight cracks the pod open, so these geniuses take this opportunity to get some major Instagram points. One sits on the pod while the other takes photos. Unfortunately, whatever's inside starts leaking out and gets inside the suit. A little head explodey, and it's time for the title credits. The Titan Find. Honestly, I like that a lot more than the painfully generic Creature, but apparently the VH cover and the movie couldn't agree on which one to go with, so I got both. About 2.5 months go by, and the crew aboard a space station orbiting Earth's moon notice a shuttle that's heading towards them on a collision course. They get a momentary glance at the shuttle crew's monstrous appearance right before the impact, which destroys the entire station. Quick little time out for a little real-world science here. Apparently in this movie it takes approximately 79 days to travel between Saturn and Earth. Just for context, the Pioneer 11 probe took 6 years and 6 months to do a similar journey back in 1973.
Now we know.
And knowing is half the battle.
We jump to the Shenandoah, a spacecraft named after the greatest fucking country band of all fucking time, motherfuckers! If I had 2 dozen roses and an old... Inside, a crew is getting a mission briefing from Ferris Bueller's dad. David Perkins. He's telling the crew their job is to set claim to the archaeological discovery found by a research team on Titan. Naturally, they want to know why the team didn't make the claim themselves, and David tells them the last survivor of the team died in a space station collision. Which should probably be a giant red flag, but whatever. A paycheck's a paycheck. The crew also shows a bit of apprehension that a simple claim needs a security detail. In her first move, Bryce, the security officer, begins confiscating drugs from the medical bay. Then we get a few scenes showing the crew's camaraderie and how well they seem to get along. Chess games, witty banter, coffee chastising, you've seen it all before in 100 other movies. Everyone gets along great until the monster starts chewing people's heads off, and that's when you find out who really is who. Susan and John head to the part of the ship with the best view of the planet as they approach. Susan admits she thinks Saturn is creepy and that she has some concerns about the trip. She goes so far as to say she feels like she won't be coming back. Then she asks John to make love to her, and we get a clunky, artsy love scene bathed in orange Saturn light. And when I say artsy, I mean no titties or bodily fluids. The crew begins their approach to Titan's surface, and we get a lot of technobabble about landing in a crater and that Richter Dynamics has beaten them to the find. Mike is none too happy about not being told the German competition was also involved, but David says there's still a chance it hasn't been claimed. Mike says his crew isn't trained for this situation, but David says that's why Bryce is along for the ride. They continue butting heads until David orders him to land in the crater. Folks, I didn't put that sound effect in. This movie, honest to God, stole a sound effect from Star Wars and acted like none of us would notice. At this point in time, all 3 movies of the original trilogy had been out, so that sound effect was already quite well known among the public. And of all places to put it, during a landing sequence? We get a lot more technobabble during a shaky landing, and the Shenandoah touches down quite gently. Everyone lets out a sigh of relief a few seconds too early because the ship begins sinking below the surface. Once settled, Mike orders Beth to try and contact Richter Dynamics, but David cancels that order. And I suppose these two are going to be measuring their dicks against each other this entire movie. Beth says she's tried to send the message but can't get through, so they decide to head over to the other ship on foot, which sounds like a swell plan. John says the surface temp is 288 degrees below zero, but in the underground tunnels it's much warmer, minus 77 degrees. Thankfully, everyone's got their suits on. Eventually, the crew reaches the German ship and find the door standing wide open. John, Mike, and Bryce step inside, and Susan joins them at the last second. They close the door behind them and begin to snoop around. A quick scan shows there's air inside, so they take off their helmets, but Mike warns them to not set them down. Susan makes her way to a science station where she finds one of the pods the previous crew discovers. It appears to have been ripped open. John gives her a stupid jump scare and they take a closer look at the container. John steps away, leaving Susan alone as she wanders about and finds something worth eating in this lab. Now, part of me was really hoping this was going to be used for a gruesome special effect later on, but it's no more harmful than a peanut M&M, apparently. She checks a compartment and a body tumbles out. She screams and backs up into a locker, which reveals another dead body. The rest of the crew runs out to find out what Susan was screaming about, and that's when something comes walking down the hallway towards them. Bryce takes a couple of shots, but they all retreat back the way they came. They get to their exit, but their clunky helmets accidentally shut the door before Susan can escape. We get a little predator vision right before Susan's head pops like a water balloon inches away from John's face on the other side of the door. Bryce gives John a tranquilizer to calm him down, and they suit up to go back outside. As they trudge back to the Shenandoah, Wendy gives us the "you better take a look at this" cliche, and they stumble across the original archaeological dig site. David says the materials will be worth a fortune, and Bryce says, only if we make it back. One of them pushes a switch on the wall, and some of the lab equipment powers up. Beth takes a closer look at one of the containers and finds another body. And that's when they all decide to get back to their ship. Mike comes to check on Beth, who's still rattled by the recent events. He tells her they're going to try to repair the ship enough to lift out of the crater. Beth begins crying over Susan's death, and Mike gives her the task of putting together a transmitter to call for assistance in getting out of there. Back at security, Bryce is taking off her clothes and is suddenly attacked by H.R. Giger. Actually, it's Hans, the sole survivor of the German crew. Like you needed to be told the character named Hans was German. Since this is an 80s movie and he's the foreign one, we gotta establish him as creepy and weird right away. He immediately cops the feel, but Bryce breaks free and goes for a gun. Mike immediately interrogates him, who he is, how he got in the ship, etc., etc. Hans says he can help them get off the moon because he knows what it is they're up against. He says what they found is someone's collection of life from all over the galaxy and that some of those life forms aren't very friendly. His crew brought one of the canisters aboard his ship thinking the specimen was in suspended animation, but it was alive and waiting. His crew had 22 members, but he's the last one alive. Now that we're sufficiently spooked out, we cut to John, who's listening to the soundtrack to his favorite Twilight Zone episodes. Susan's voice calls to him several times before she pops up in the window and asks for help. Hans explains that the creature is using its victims to help it kill with some kind of collective intelligence, but the crew is having trouble believing him. Meanwhile, John has suited up and goes outside to chase after Susan, who isn't wearing a helmet and has a lot of blood running down her head. There's a lot of red flags here, but I guess we can blame it on the tranquilizers. Susan leads John to a spot and starts taking off her suit. Full-on high beams here, but remember, it's anywhere between minus 77 and minus 288 degrees Fahrenheit, so hard nipples are to be expected at the very least. Susan takes John's helmet off and locks lips as he tumbles to the ground. She makes out with him for a few moments before sticking him with a pretzel spider or something. Wendy comes running to inform the rest that John is gone. The outside door is open and there's a suit missing. Hans says he's checked on the ship's air supply and there's not enough to waste on a search party. But they have just enough to make a one-way trip to the German ship. Mike says they can take air tanks from the dead bodies at the dig site. When Hans sees that Bryce is going out, he volunteers to join her, and once outside, he cops another feel. Grabby little thing, ain't he? Beth continues working on her transmitter and notices someone's trying to contact them. It's John calling from the German ship to tell them there's plenty of air on his side. They ask about Susan and the thing that attacked them, but John says there's no sign of either. He also says the ship is ready to go, barring a few simple repairs that shouldn't take any time at all. John cuts the transmission and spins around to show some slimy thing sucking on his ear. Back at the dig site, Hans and Bryce start gathering oxygen tanks from the dead. Bryce examines one of the dead bodies and realizes it's Susan, who immediately jumps up and attacks. Mike tells Beth to wait at the Shenandoah in case Hans and Bryce come back while the rest go to the German ship to investigate. Thankfully, we skip the walk over. The crew open the door, guns at the ready, and almost blast John, who's all bandaged up. Mike asks what happened, and he makes up some bullshit about an injury he got while in engineering. Wendy insists on checking him out, and he agrees as long as she goes with him so he can finish his repairs. David notices there are system monitors still out, and he and Mike agree they should do their own ship inspections. Wendy and John make it to engineering, and wouldn't you know it, the lights don't work. After a few moments, John calls for Wendy to come on in. A few steps in, the door shuts behind her, and she bumps into a few bloody corpses hanging from the ceiling. John grabs a hold of her, and she scratches his face, which peels like an overripe mandarin. John spins her around to see the big bad baddie slowly approaching. Mike gets there just in time to see a big toothy mouth chewing on Wendy's neck. It slips to the other side, takes a chomp, and we get a lovely decapitation. John, who's looking more like a deadite these days, pops up and throws Mike to the other side of the room. The two fight for a bit before David shows up and blows the ever-loving fuck out of John's head. Ooh, so good. And now these two are super best friends. Back at the Shenandoah, Beth is working on her transmitter when something in a spacesuit knocks the power out. She goes to the airlock and suits up, but realizes she forgot her tools. After she leaves, the camera pans over to see the door open up and a shadow approach. Ooh, spooky. Hearing a noise, she calls out to see if it's Bryce, but no one answers back. We get the view of someone's legs walking behind Beth, and she turns around to see extra special creepy Hans. His face is oozing and peeling like me 10 minutes after leaving the water park. He tries to attach a parasite, but Beth breaks away and makes it to the airlock. Before she can finish suiting up, Hans pries the door open, forcing her to escape into the cold lunar surface without her helmet. Several air-free moments go by before she gets the helmet locked on and continues her retreat. Mike's using the German ship's transmitter to contact Beth, but obviously no one's going to answer. They head off to find the oxygen tanks, but only find damaged suits. Back at control, David sees Beth outside being chased. Mike wants to let her in, but David says she could already be infected. Beth collapses before she can make it to the German ship, and a pair of legs show up behind her. Mike opens the airlock, and an unknown person carries Beth inside. They get her helmet off and check on her, completely ignoring the other suited individual. Oh, what a surprise! It's Hans, and he's really starting to stink. We get a bit of a fight, and David blasts a hole through Hans's chest, which does fuck all to stop him. Mike grabs the parasite off his head, which kills him for good. Thankfully, Beth seems to be just fine. Beth catches the guys up on what happened and why she had to escape. They speculate that the parasites use mind control and replace the brain. Then David drops this stupid line.
Yeah, and we're next on the menu.
What the fuck does that even mean? They didn't even set that line up at all. They're talking about brains and mind control, and you jump in with that? How about something like, and we're next on the transplant list? Still not great, but not as dumb as what they went with. The three try to figure out how to kill that thing once and for all, and Beth suggests the ship's fusion unit. Then she says this.
I saw a movie once We're a group of people. We're trapped in an ice station by a carrot from another planet.
And I'm pretty sure she's referencing 1951's The Thing from Another World. But they go ahead and go with her idea of electrocuting the monster. Suddenly there's a breach in life support which has flooded the fusion unit with Titan's gas. Beth tracks a few open doors and they believe it's the monster moving around. David goes to the computer room to monitor security cameras while Mike and Beth head to engineering. Once inside, Beth freaks out over something and Mike shushes her and suggests it's had its fill. I paused the film here and I have stared into this inky black mess and I don't see anything. The two continue creeping forward around something, and I'm kind of thinking the effects crew forgot to put a prop in post. Beth starts rewiring a console, and just as she finishes, the monster wakes up. Apparently it was on the floor the whole time. Do you see it in this establishing shot? I don't, but maybe I'm just missing it. Mike shoots it with his gun, and Beth slips past it, and the two are able to run down the corridor all the way back to control. Beth tries to activate the trap, but
I can't find the right bus. All this shit's written in German.
thankfully the monster is walking at a Jason Voorhees pace, and Beth is able to shock the fucker, giving us our first real glimpse of the thing. It falls to the floor in an electrical heap. Mike goes to check if it's really dead, and apparently the best way to do that is to tap it with his gun barrel. How about you shoot it from a distance to see if it pisses it off first? With the monster dead, the three go to get prepped to leave, but Beth just can't leave well enough alone and goes to check one more time. It only lets her kick it once for free before waking up and taking chase. Mike and David run back to the monster to find a greasy spot in its place and Beth hanging by her feet from the rafters. Mike glances through a window and the monster plays peekaboo. David says there's got to be another way in and goes back to the computer room to check the ship's blueprints. Once he's found the route, he relays the message to Mike and the two take their positions. While moving around, David finds some heavy-duty explosives and takes one along with him. In the next room, he finds some cargo netting, and this motherfucker's trying to MacGyver his way to the end of this movie, isn't he? He finally reaches his destination and finds the hatch to engineering is already open. Mike tries to call him on the radio, but he's not answering, so he blasts open the doors to go rescue Beth. David sets the detonation device on his explosive just as a drooling beastie shows up behind him. Seriously, how is this fucker so goddamn quiet? Mike finds David in the monster's clutches while it chews on his neck. David points to the switch on the wall, then activates the detonator. And I'm kind of thinking Disney stole this bit for The Emperor's New Groove.
Pull the lever, Kronk. Wrong lever!
Mike hits the switch, sending David and the monster tumbling down. Unfortunately, it does nothing to the monster, who's already waiting at the airlock. The door closes, trapping Beth inside. Mike takes a few shots, but can't hit the explosive, so he just says, "Fuck it," and jump kicks the monster out the door. Just a reminder, it's at least minus 77 degrees out here. There's no oxygen, and he's not wearing a suit. The monster picks Mike up and strangles him. In an oxygen-free environment. And we watch the explosive count down to 0 and... malfunction!
Fuck! Even in the future, nothing works!
The monster throws Mike away. Suddenly, Bryce shows up after being absent for the past 40 fucking minutes of the film and blows the monster to pieces. Hey, no rush or anything, but can we get Mike inside? He's been completely exposed in temperatures you usually have to travel up Alaskan mountains to see. Once inside, Mike finally asks where Bryce has been the whole time. She says that when Susan killed Hans, she ran back to the Shenandoah, and since there was no one there, she headed to the German ship. Mike says she was gone a long time, and her answer to that is...
I got lost.
That's it? That's what the writers came up with? How about I fell into a ditch? I had a suit malfunction.
I ate bad guacamole and I couldn't stop shitting. Any of those would have been fine.
Our three survivors fire up the German ship and begin the long trip home.
Is it over?
Yes.
Are we going to be okay?
Yes.
Do you think maybe the baby couldn't have drowned in the pool?
No, you left the gate open and she sank like a stone. You have to live with that for the rest of your life.
Well, that ending came out of fucking nowhere, didn't it? Actually, that audio was from American Dad. I couldn't help myself with that one. Honestly, by way of alien knockoffs, this one isn't really that bad, but it's just a tad dull. The monster is just a generic toothy rubber suit, but at least they took it a step further and added the parasite, zombie, hive mind angle to give it something to stand out from the others. Or maybe that was just to limit the need to have the monster on screen. Honestly, it's probably that. There were quite a few of these movies in the early 80s trying to capitalize on the success of Alien, and some did it better than others. If you kind of liked Creature but wanted it to be a little better, then give Leviathan a shot, if you haven't already. Oh sure, it's deep sea and not deep space, but it's definitely one of my favorite Alien knockoffs by far. Creature, or The Titan Find, whichever you prefer, was directed by William Malone. Some of his other directorial gigs include Scared to Death, which is the book Beth was reading at the beginning, by the way. 2 episodes of Tales from the Crypt, including Only Skin Deep, which is one of my personal favorites, 1999's House on Haunted Hill, Fear.com, and the Fair-Haired Child episode of Masters of Horror. Our fearless captain, played by Stan Ivar, has enjoyed a pretty decent acting career, 19 episodes and 3 TV movies of Little House on the Prairie, 60 episodes of Days of Our Lives, and numerous one-time guest shots on TV shows through the 80s and 90s. Lyman Ward played the expedition lead and is probably best known as playing Ferris Bueller's father, but he also starred in A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, Sleepwalkers, Independence Day, and Not Another Teen Movie. The icy at first but adorable at end security officer Bryce was played by Diane Salinger in her acting debut. She has gone on to star in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Batman Returns, 19 episodes of Power Rangers Lightspeed Rescue, Pee-wee's Big Holiday, and still has some forthcoming projects as of this recording. But probably the biggest recognizable voice among the cast would be Wendy Shaw, or as most people know her today, Francine Smith on American Dad. She's done quite a bit of TV work from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and has been in more than a few cult favorites like Munchies, Inner Space, Batteries Not Included, The Burbs, and Small Soldiers. And even though this movie is considered to be an Alien knockoff, it should be noted that some of the special and visual effects crew actually went on to work on Aliens, including Doug Beswick, Alec Gillis, Alan G. Markowitz, Pat McClung, Jay Roth, Dennis Skotak, and Robert Skotak. In fact, if you check out the special and visual effects team, you'll see a massive listing of fantastic movies that this crew had at least some part of. Impressive lineup, huh? Whew, so thus concludes my second season of Basement Tapes. And before I go any further, I want to thank all of you who continue to come by and check out my videos. It's a project I enjoy doing, but knowing so many of you continue to support me makes it a lot more fun to work on. But it wouldn't be a season finale if we didn't go back and see how much schlock we had. So let's bring up that end of season sleaze docket and recap what we saw. We had 36 dead bodies, 46 cups blood, 44 naked breasts, 4 naked butts, and 1 naked bajingo. Now, compare that with the end of Season 1 sleaze docket. You know, we're really right there with the overall quality of content, because if we don't have death, blood, and skin, what's the friggin' point? Well, I'm off to take a little break from the flicks, but don't worry, kiddies. I've already got 6 movies lined up and just waiting to be reviewed in Sugar Pants Basement Tapes Season 3, The Search for More Money. So until I greet you then, this is your old pal Sugar Pants. See you in your dreams.
Holy shit!